Fans, we are back live with another edition of the Great North Wrestling Podcast on thehannibaltv.com. My name is Jack Kilby, Executive Vice President of Great North Wrestling. And tonight, live from literal Death Valley, I am pleased to welcome a man who made his mark in the professional wrestling business, not only in the WWE, TNA, but multiple other locations, and has a very interesting story in general. And I would be talking about the one and only Sinn Bohdi. Sinn, how are you tonight, sir?
I'm good. How are you, sir? Thank you for having me.
I am excellent. I'd like to start off to give the fans an idea, baseline, in terms of a career interview. If you were a fan of the professional wrestling business growing up, and if so, what territories did you follow companies?
That is a great question. All right, you hit me with a good one right out of the gate. Good stuff. All right, I went to lock up with you, and you fucking super kicked me. Good stuff. Okay, I hope I can cuss on here. I know.
Curse at will, sir.
Yeah, there's no bounds on the interesting net, right?
No, sir.
So the show, okay, so I grew up on like Saturday, Sunday morning, WWF, like Maple Leaf Wrestling and all that stuff. And that's what I grew up on. I saw glimpses of NWA and AWA and so forth in the magazines. Like, as a kid, it would be a rat race. It would be a, sprint to get to the little variety store to get those only certain amount of copies of PWI and Wrestling, Insider and all those kind of things. And so you get glimpses of these black and white pictures, and sometimes it'd be like the fold out color pictures of Road Warriors, Magnum TA, Rock and Roll Express, Ric Flair, and Nikita Koloff and all this stuff. And then my brain couldn't process why I wasn't seeing those guys on WWF, but that just, the child's brain, you're looking at it more like maybe this is kind of more like Marvel and DC. These two universes just don't collide for whatever reason. So to me, I was kind of ignorant to all the other smaller shows and territory shows when I was a kid. But as far as if you're going to ask me that question as a kid, I would say little Sinn Jr. would kind of look at it like WWF and NWA were sort of Marvel and DC. And everything else was kind of little weird offshooty things of those two big giant brands. But growing up, or whatever, for lack of a better term, this version of Sinn Bohdi, if I could just watch something that I just had no clue that existed when I was a kid, I'd say maybe like the Georgia Championship Wrestling and stuff like that. Where guys like Jake the Snake and just all these guys kind of like were birthed, and to see some of those gritty and some of the Florida stuff too. This is really a complex answer. We could talk for this hour just about this question alone. But seeing some of the really gritty storylines that maybe they're too, I don't know, gruff for modern day, maybe. Not to get crotchety right out of the gate. Santa Beard notwithstanding. Like often I feel like as a coach, I want to be patient, and I'm very Mary Poppins as a coach, but I'm also have a very Demolition Man side to me, where I perpetually feel like Stallone in that cop car in the scene in Demolition Man, where the other young police officers are listening to those show tunes, and Stallone is just like, what's going on right now? I just want to blow things up and punch things, So I think my brain is kind of in that caveman mode where I want to see stuff that looks gritty, as my good old Canadian pal, brother, Edge would say. I want it covered in sandpaper. I want it rough sandpaper. And I think those territories, like the Florida stuff and the Georgia stuff, and World Class and those kind of things, like the meaner, like those not stiffer shows, but like just the grittier. That's the word I can go to, and to use the favorite word of my mentor and friend and brother and legend Jake the Snake is credibility. That is such an invaluable word. Like I'm very impressed and oohed and awed by some of the fancy moves that you see in the modern era. And there's some of those moves were back in the day too. But I'm just a big fan of smother and cover, all of those fancy moves, or just knuckle sandwiches or eye gouges with that gritty devil in the details, just caveman work, So like I like AJ Styles. Like I think pound for pound, in the modern day, to me, AJ, you can't do any wrong by watching an AJ Styles match because he's got just the best of all the worlds smashed together. He's got sports entertainment. He's got old school. He's got lucha libre. He's got strong style. He's got Memphis walk and talk. He's got all that. Again, so as I was warning you off camera, this interview will be riddled with dogs barking and chickens clucking and so forth. Ops, you leave those kitties alone. Those are nice kitties, baby face kitties. You leave those kitties alone. I have a couple of my cats that sit on the porch outside, and my dog is lovely and he loves us, but he is a 120-pound pit bull, 120 pounds of pure love, but he doesn't like the cats and he doesn't like the mailman. So mailman is fine. The mailman can defend themselves, but the cats, I've got a soft spot for the critters.
No, fair enough. So you were a fan growing up. You saw all this great stuff, similar to what I did growing up around the Toronto area as well. What was the instigating factor that you decided to pursue it as a career? And I know you were trained by the legendary Ron Hutchison, amongst some others. I was wondering if you could answer that two-part question, if you will.
Sure. So Ron was the guy that gave me my basics. So it's not like there's any kind of different style, or not styles, that's not the right word. It's not like getting your white belt, yellow belt, orange belt, blah, 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 black belt. It's, you kind of go through these, you get introduced to the ring and you get your basics taught, and then your story kind of blossoms and you go where you go. You're a butterfly and you butterfly effect the world by traveling. You maybe get in your car, maybe get an airplane, maybe move to Japan, maybe move to, for me, I as soon as I got into Ron school, I got in my car and I headed into the States and really didn't turn back, really. Some guys would go to overseas across the pond, some guys in Japan, Mexico, wherever their journey takes them. But Ron gave me my basics, and those are very, 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 very important. As my buddy D'Lo Brown would say, you could decorate your house as fancy as you want to do that, but if you don't have a good solid foundation, it's all going to crumble. So Ron was that special, solid foundation guy. And I've told this in many interviews, but like my first day of wrestling class at Ron Hutchinson's at Sully's gym was harder than like my first black belt rating. And that was no easy task. Like I full contact sparred like 3 guys at a time. I put my hand through cinder blocks, and not sports entertainment cinder blocks. I mean, proper cinder blocks. And Ron's first class was harder than all that. I was the second smallest person in a platoon of maybe 12, 14 guys, whatever it was. And the only person smaller than me was Trish Stratus. Everybody else. And I'm 6'1", 245 pounds. So if that tells you the size of these guys back in the day. And you watched Apocalypse Wrestling, so you would have seen some of those guys, Like I was high flying around just because I had these big, giant, 2-legged jungle gyms to play on. Like they were huge. And I was the fast guy. And still, when I stand next to some of the old school guys, I still am the fast guy. Like Jake the Snake makes me look like a midget, and he's, speaking of the second part of your question. So Ron gave me my basic training, and then I hit the road. And then Jake, soon after that, became my mentor and my opponent. He was my idol, then he was my opponent, and then he was my mentor and then friend. And he's a very, very close, but he's in the top 5 humans that I care about on this planet. Like he's family to me, and he actually officiated my wedding. So wow. We are thick as thieves. He hates when I say this, but I always refer to him as my fairy godbrother, brother. Like, shut up, I hate that. Which makes me only want to say it more. And then so from there, between training, training at OVW, I got to train under Al Snow and Rip Rogers, Robert Gibson, Danny Davis, so forth. And then there was guest coaches that would come in, like Barry Windham or Greg Valentine or Dr. Death, which was amazing. But the coaches on the regular were Al and Rip Rogers and Robert Gibson. And then when I got hired from WWE, they sent me down to FCW, to Florida Championship Wrestling, and got trained by Dr. Tom, Dusty Rhodes, Ricky Steamboat, Steve Kern, and Smiley. So not too shabby of a roster of teachers to stuff some knowledge between these not really good looking ears of mine, you know. So there you go. There you go.
Absolutely. You touched on the Apocalypse Wrestling Federation in Toronto, which at one time had Missy Hyatt as the champion, and seemed to get a good little buzz during the period of time that they were, operating. And I wanted to ask you about how you, if that was where you consider yourself to have broken in, and what it was like being a young guy performing in a venue like the CNE, the Canadian National Exhibition.
That was CNE is where I cut my teeth, and it was very special to me. I mean, when I was a little kid, I watched, the Machines, and I watched Hulk Hogan and Jake the Snake versus Ricky Steamboat, and I remember Orndorff and Hogan, and I remember the Machines and Bundy and Stud, and all these were the guys of my my childhood imagination. These were my real life Marvel and DC characters,
The big event in '85.
Yeah. And then so to actually wrestle there years later was a really, really good, and that was like my first thing. And Ron had said, look, you guys are gonna be wrestling like every hour or so all day for like 2 weeks. And I said, okay. And I was still doing the martial arts at the time, like on the regular. I've just always kind of dabbled ever since, but I was still doing it on the regular. And so back then I was a very leggy sort of martial artist. I could really throw those, not quite Jean-Claude Van Damme style of kicks, but pretty close. I could throw some pretty fancy, stretchy kicks and all that stuff. And I was at a karate club in Toronto sparring, and you kind of agree. You decide, are we going to go light? Are we going to go medium? Are we going to go full contact? You kind of just agree, and then you go in and you spar. Or you're at a tournament, and then the tournament is you signed up for some such, like you're either signing up to do like point fighting, which is kind of like playing tag but with fighting. And sorry, I don't know if that was me or you, but my internet and your internet, but I just saw there was a big weird like.
You're back. Just a second, you were gone.
Okay. So at the tournaments, like, there's either the point style tournaments or the full contact tournaments and what have you. So I think I was getting ready for some full contact tournament, if I remember correctly. And so I was sparring at this gym, and me and the guy that were just practicing, we had agreed to go full contact. And so again, me with my gorgeous rocket, but donkey powerful legs, I threw a couple kicks into this guy's ribs that just rocked him in outer space. And then so what I would do is I would fake with high, light, fancy right kicks. And then I would kind of get that person sort of lulled into my fight psychology, I would level them with like in the middle of the body. We call it like a through the body shot, where even if they're dukes up, it just rocks right through you. Like I would put it kind of right into the side of them, and it would just push their elbow into their ribs. So they're expecting this side nice and high, nothing to it, just fluffy, 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 and then all of a sudden low here, boom. And it was just a great way to win the dude, to just basically cut a dude in half. And I don't remember exactly what again, this was so long ago, but I don't remember exactly what I was thinking, but I zigged when I should have zagged. So instead of doing that usual formula, which seemed to really work for me in the tournaments, I kicked, high and fluffy with my right foot. And then I went to put it in low and hard, like kind of, I was going to like go bing, 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 bing. Like if you can see my hand, like my foot, I'm going bing, high, 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 high. And I was going to go boom, low. And as I went low, maybe he was kind of clocking my hips. He was watching my movement somehow. Because as a fighter, you watch hips first. You can see, like, if I'm going to throw a punch, my left hip is coming back as my right arm is coming forward and stuff. So fighterly stuff, not, sports entertainment stuff. But so maybe he just had a good beat on my footwork. I don't know, but I think combo that with gun shy. He was tired of getting clipped, and he put his elbow down on the other side. My foot, my shin just caught him the right way where he was just defending himself, but he wasn't even trying to hit me. He put his elbow just down the right way where it went into my shin, and it sucked. It really freaking hurt. And I had what they call a bruised bone, but I didn't know what that was at the time. It just felt like there's a squishy mass in front of my shin. And we're so used to again, just like those blood sport kickboxer movies, you're kicking those palm trees and all that stuff. You toughen up your shins. So I've got like these ridiculously strong, durable shins. And even that, I was just like, holy crap. So when you feel something, you're like, oh, this isn't good. And so my foot started going like black and blue from like about my middle of my shin and my calf all the way down my foot. It went like black. And I was so excited about my first wrestling matches at the C&E for Ron. I just didn't tell him. I'm not going to not do this. So my first 3-4 days of that CNA, whatever it was, however many days that I did, I'm kind of hopping back from the ring. Adrenaline would kind of get me to the ring and through the match. And then as I kind of cooled down, he's Ron, why are you hopping? Let me see your leg. I'm like, oh, it's fine, whatever. And he's like, no, show me. And I would just kind of play it off. And then finally he's like, let me see your leg. I'm not happy with how you're walking around this locker room. Let me take a look at your leg. Him and another EMT that were on site, I pulled my boot off and my foot was black. And they both, even the EMT was like, holy shit, you got to go to the fucking hospital, man. And begrudgingly I did. And so they drained this and did that and and sprinkled some whatever medical voodoo on me, whatever they did to me. And I had to sit out the second half of the second leg, pardon the pun, of that CD. And I was pissed, super pissed. I don't remember even what your question was, but that was just something I haven't thought about in a long time. So you just couch sessioned that out of my brain. So there you go.
That's tremendous. A fan on social media wanted me to ask you about your long-time friendship with Edge and Christian and your reaction to their longevity in the business. And I wanted to ask you if you saw that absolutely tremendous last man standing match for AEW in Toronto recently that I was there live and was blown away that guys have, that vintage that have been at it so long could go that hard.
So I haven't seen it yet. I want to. I usually keep right up on everything, and I just for the last couple of weeks it's just been go here. I've been traveling a lot and coming in and out of town. When I am in town, then I've got me and my wife have sort of like an unofficial animal rescue that really takes a lot of time, and I make those figurines for people that takes a lot of time as well. So I haven't seen a lot of what I want to watch. Spectacular. I have no doubt that it was spectacular. I'm looking forward to watching it, and I want to see even a couple of things that Adam has done since. I want to see him and Penta. I've seen some of the highlight clips of Edge and Adam and Christian, or Adam and Jay, whatever you want to call them. Laurel and Hardy, whatever you want to call them. And I saw a couple clips of the Penta Adam match. So I'm looking forward to seeing it, but I'm not surprised that they can do that. We're all in pretty darn good shape for our age, and I don't know, vintage is maybe it's a cute way of putting it, but I don't know, I'm not 25 by any means. I'm the exact same age, plus a month than Edge or Adam, plus 2 months for Christian. So, but I mean, I can press a 250-pound man over my head. I can do leapfrogs. I can do drop kicks. I can take backdrops. I can jump over the top rope backwards. I can do a lot of stuff that some of the young guys can dive. I can't wrap my brain around. I can vault over the ropes. I can grab the ropes and hop it like a fence and come off as sort of like a Macho Man-esque double axe handle or something. But I'm landing on my feet because I just don't trust 9 out of 10 clowns to keep me safe. And that is in a very heelish mindset of why I wear the clown paint that I wear. Because what I mean by that is if Scooby-Doo can put on a wig and fool everybody into thinking he's grandma, I figure, well, if I'm stuck on this fucking planet full of clowns, if I just slap on some paint, maybe I'll blend in a little bit. So that's where that whole thing comes. And as a kid, I think my dad's sort of my dad's sort of Uncola cuss word was clowns. Like we'd be driving and he'd road rage and somebody cut him off. You fucking clown, you know? So I think I just, maybe it's a bit daddy issues as well. I don't know. Cause I was a kid. I mean, I look up to him, I still do, but he's a big, terrifying kind of guy. He's a big ranked martial arts fighter and stuff. So when he yelled at somebody, you know, on the street for cutting him off, like it was scary, especially as a tiny little kid, you know? But where was I going with it? I totally just brain farted. Where was I going? What were we talking about? What the hell were we talking about?
Just their amazing.
How they can go, for that age or whatever. And again, I'm not 25 or anything. I'm not trying to fool myself. But there's stuff I can't certainly do now and stuff that I can do now that I couldn't do when I was 25. But I can win guys that are in much better shape than me, or certainly more youthful than I am. And it's not that I'm in such amazing shape, but I'm in pretty darn awesome ring shape. And like Yoda, I know my shit. You know, like I know how to work and I know how to time out my oxygen and my performance, for lack of a better term. And Edge and Christian are masters of that. You know, so I'm not surprised that those guys can do what they do. And again, I kind of just go back to the Demolition Man example. Like, again, we have a little funny farm here in Death Valley, me and my wife. And once in a while, I'll have a wrestling student come up and I'll kind of maybe trade them a wrestling lesson or pay them a few bucks or whatever for if they're going to do some yard work or something for me and do some, muck the stalls or whatever. Something I just don't want to do. But, and I remember I had this one student, great kid, and a big guy, big dude. He's got to be 6'2", 270 pounds. And I pulled up while he was doing some yard work and I had bags of chicken feed in my truck. And these bags are like 50-pound bags. And I just grabbed one with one hand and I slugged it over my shoulder. And I grabbed the other one with the other hand, slugged it over my shoulder, and I started walking. And I think I kicked the tailgate back up like with my foot while I'm holding two 50-pound bags of feed. And this kid just looks at me and goes, "How are you doing that?" And I'm like, "How can you not do that? Like, you're literally half my age, literally." He's like, "I can't pick up one of those fucking bags, let alone two, let alone fucking mule kick and I kicked it where I obviously didn't destroy my truck. I was just sort of boop, and making sure it had enough torque where I could click the little latch and then be done with it." So he was just like, how are you? Like, he was just stupefied. And I'm like, okay, not everybody just do that, but I treat everything sort of like an exercise. Like, even when I'm taking out the garbage, like, got a long driveway and you're in the little funny farm, and I'll kind of carry out like two big heavy bags, but I'll carry them side by side like I'm, doing back or like lat raises or something. Like I just treat everything like an exercise. And I think exactly like Adam and Jay, we just got heart. Something I learned from one of the coaches of coaches, Dr. Tom, who's a good friend of mine. And I learned this also from Jake the Snake. They've just pounded this into my head over the years. But you don't got heart, you don't got nothing. So you could have this wonderful physique, you could be great on the mic, you could be this, you could be that. If you don't got heart, you're on a timer, bro. So I remember seeing this one guy that was like, I want to say he was over 7 feet tall, and like, he looked good. He wasn't like the 7-foot bag of milk or anything. He looked like a fucking Hercules. And I remember Doc just could be bothered with him. And I remember asking Doc, I'm like, "How come you don't like that guy? Like, he's just like, no matter how much I lift weights, I'm never going to be 7 feet tall." And he just looked at me. He didn't have to think about it and ponder it, nothing. He just looked at me and goes, "He's got no heart. He's got no fucking heart." And that's all he said. And he just walked away. He goes, "I can't work with that." And Jake was always like that as well. Like, he goes like, "I like you and we've been friends for a long time." He goes, "But I became friends with you because I saw, like, Stevie Wonder could see you have heart. I want to be associated with that. Because whether you're ever successful or not, I want to be around good people. And I want to be around somebody that's got heart." And I never have forgotten that ever. And, I think that was something that, I don't know, maybe by osmosis, I got it from my dad. Maybe he learned it to me. I don't know. But, I find that to be very, very, very important. So there you go.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you about so you wrestled literally around the world. You got a wide range of opponents early in your career. Some work in England, but in 2003 you signed first with TNA and joined James Mitchell's stable and did some work with Raven's group at the time. A real, in my opinion, real underrated period of wrestling history. Those great pay-per-views at the fairgrounds. Wanted to ask you about your memories of working with Father James and working Raven, etc., in the fairgrounds.
Yeah, that was definitely a really fun time for me. I learned a lot. I was still pretty wet behind the ears at that stage of the game, but was surrounded by people that, you know, were kind and had heart and had brains and taught me a lot of things, you know, from Jim Mitchell to Wolfie D to Shane Douglas. And then weirdly, so me and Raven were very standoffish. Really, like I was polite to him, but I think he was kind of in a grumpy headspace and whatever. And then it wasn't until years later that we really got along great. Like we get along amazingly now. I think he's awesome. And I mean, I thought he was awesome back then, but he was just, you know, kind of in his own headspace and, you know, whatever was going on up there. He's a super uber intelligent guy. So I think with cleverness, you know, equals complex problems inside your brain. You know, as an artsy fartsy guy, I can sometimes be my own worst enemy. So I appreciate Raven having his own inner workings to deal with. And maybe I was just one of the young guys that kind of got the way and paid the price for just being in the way, you know, of his thoughts or whatever was going on. But Shane Douglas didn't know me anything and taught me the world. Jim Mitchell, the same thing. Wolfie D, the same thing. Kid Cash, the same thing. I was just surrounded by some really, really great guys that are skilled and talented, and all of them had heart. You know, being part of the new church was super cool because even, you know, they had us doing something cool or they had us doing something goofy, whatever it was, we would walk through those curtains at the Nashville Fairgrounds and people would just start and chant evil, evil. And we see those red lights. It was really just the stuff of magic. It was so cool, you know. And I remember years later, we did one of those one night only TNA pay-per-views, Impact pay-per-views. And me and Jim Mitchell and Wolfie D, it had been years, and all three of us walked through catering together. And we were this is in Florida, like it was being taped in Orlando. So we're all in like beach shorts and flip-flops. So like, you know, of course we're wearing, I'm sure, you know, we're not in black leather and chains. We're in like flowery, fluffy beach shorts and flip-flops, and even dolled up, dressed up like, you know, Fast Times at Ridgemount High. The guys in the catering just all kind of went, and they just were like, whoa. Like, they're like, you three together are so fucking scary looking. Like, I remember even Crowbar walking up, he goes, even in your fucking flip-flops, you three are creepy as fuck. So I think we're all creepy at our individually, but I think when you stack as 3 for 3, then I guess you just have, I guess, a triple creepy, smothered and covered creepiness. So it was cool to have that sort of mystique, and it just, you know, like working in a business where you're a caricature of yourself, like you're not playing a role and you're not playing you, but you are you, and that role is very much you. Like, it's very convoluted from real life to the fiction of it. Kind of like maybe like a Rob Zombie or a Pee Wee Herman, as opposed to Mark Hamill playing Luke Skywalker. Like, you know, Harrison Ford, that's Indiana Jones or Han Solo. Whereas, you know, if Hulk Hogan walks in the mall, people go, oh, that's Hulk Hogan. They're not going to say, oh, it's Terry Bollea playing Hulk Hogan. You know, so it's such a weird business like that. And so you become these things, you know, and you sort of, there's a silly term that says like live in the gimmick. And, you know, if you have a creepy character or a sexy character or a funny character or whatever, I guess it kind of is there to haunt you. It's there whether you want it or not, you know. But I think just the ambience of being such a sort of creepy character was a fun toy for me, because again, I think being a student of Jake the Snake, meaning you're a student of psychology, that you're always trying to find ways to credibly amuse the fans, you know, make them love you, make them hate you, make them worry about you, make them loathe you, make them want to see you get stopped, want to make you see you get, you know, your just desserts or your revenge or your eye for an eye or whatever. And so like the ambiance of those red lights in Nashville, like when those lights came on, you just knew that was sort of new church country. We have the work rate where, you know, we can get over and we can get our heat in a brightly lit gymnasium, you know, like a me or a Wolfie D or a Boogeyman or a Gangrel. But it sure is easier when the mystique is there, the lights and the music and the fog and all the stuff is there. Like it's like watching Star Wars or something without any of the mood music, you know, or without any of the lasers or the costumes. Like, yeah, they're all good actors, but the details help facilitate the story and kind of fills in all the blanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely memorable stuff. After some time in OVW, you moved to FCW, Florida Championship Wrestling, and again, you know, had some memorable opponents and matches there. Wanted to ask you, as someone who was in FCW, your experience and how that may be different than, which I'm sure you're aware of, the golden era, so to speak, of the NXT system, and how they switched up the program, so to speak, from FCW.
Well, I mean, developmental systems weren't anything new by the time FCW rolled around. Like, I mean, I was literally, I was there for 10 seconds in and out in Memphis when they started dabbling as a developmental system. I stuck my head in Deep South, but I wasn't at Deep South. And so, but it's relatively a new concept. So it certainly was more streamlined at FCW than it was, you know, maybe at OVW or at Deep South or in Memphis. And then the natural progression of that was NXT. And I've guest coached there multiple times, and it's amazing. Like, I feel like a kid in Toys R Us every time I go there. It's awesome. I think I was talent at a time at that company when the developmental system was still sort of looked at as like that sort of redheaded stepchild, you know, where now it's still like, I think there's always going to be, you know, somebody that's not thrilled about something, but for the most part, it's so much more accepted as part of like the overall branding. Like, at no point did WWE ever consider FCW as a third brand or anything like that, where NXT is, you know, and more or less depending on who you'd ask. But still, FCW certainly not. It wasn't for lack of talent. It was just the developmental system in its archaic infancy, I guess. But yeah, I got to wrestle a lot of great guys, whether it was at TNA and some of that bled over into FCW. But yeah, I mean, like, you know, from wrestling CM Punk at TNA to wrestling, you know, with, oh geez, so many guys: Drew McIntyre, Heath Slater, Colt Cabana, Kofi Kingston, Ziggler, Cody, you know, you name it. I think a couple guys always thought it was neat that I've wrestled Cody, Dustin, and Dusty.
Yeah,
so
wow.
that was kind of a neat hat trick, I suppose, to get Canadian on you. I don't know if technically that's a Canadian term, but I think I've only ever heard Canadians ever say that word. So
yeah, I think you're right. Most fans still remember what an impact you made in 2008 when the Kazarni vignettes started to air on SmackDown. And I wanted to ask you, how was that pitched to you? Was that a creation of yours? And could you say a phrase or two in Carney and explain to the audience how that ancient language works? That's a lot in one question, I know. Sorry.
So when I first started riding with Jake the Snake, he thought that it was cool that I was doing the carnival stuff, and he's like, "You should stick with that because Vince McMahon really likes that kind of, you know, the carnival stuff." And pro wrestling was, you know, kind of born in the carnival, and so I'm like, okay, I'm with that, and I enjoy doing it, and I kind of thought, if I can parlay this into sort of a parallel career, then that sounds good, and if Vince will like it, well, that's the goal. You know, so when I had my sit down with Vince, I didn't use terms like freak show or circus. I used carnival. Again, just more for wrestling purposes, and we got along great. I could see the sort of maniacal, I could see the wheels turning as we were discussing stuff. But I chose to look like that at the time. But I was wrestling as Sinn Bohdi. But I had the blonde sort of Rip Rogers, Michael Hayes sort of hair with the black beard and that kind of stuff. And I was very flashy visually. So he liked all that just fine. And then he's like, okay, let me think about this. And so the next day, I think this was like an Unforgiven. And so the next day on Raw, he come up to me at ringside and he's like, we're going to call you Kazarni. That's Carney for Carney. You get it? I'm like, yes, this is Dizu. And he asked me if I could speak Carney. And I said, yes, this is Kizan. And so then I was off to the races. And I remember coming back to Florida a couple of days afterwards. Dusty was there and he giggling and he's like, baby, me and Bear Windham, we was up in gorilla position and we thought you talking to Mother McMahon and we're hitting buttons try to hear because like the ring is all mic so you can hear everything, And we hitting buttons try to hear what y'all talking about. Well, eavesdrop, baby. Well, we couldn't hit the right buttons. Me and Bear Windham, we don't know nothing about no buttons. And so we just started lip syncing and making up shit and stuff. So what do you say? What do you say? And I told him they wanted to call me Kazarni and Dusty was just like, all right. And I'm like, so that's kind of how that went. So I was thoroughly, I'll say I'm not going to squawk and bitch about it. I'm going to say I was thoroughly happy for the opportunity. I wish it was something like, so the premise of the character was certainly up my alley and the visual was me, but I wasn't the biggest fan of the name or speaking Carney because I thought Vince really wanted me to be a babyface. And I thought that Carney is just that gibberish is just going to sort of be irritating. And that's not what you want out of a babyface. Out of a heel, sure, but not out of a babyface. And weirdly, up until that time, like I just wrestled about 90% of the time as a heel. So Sinn Bohdi in Florida had his heat as a kind of a fun to watch, vicious, sometimes funny, sometimes villain. And then so now I had to kind of flip that on its ear because, the boss is the boss and he wants you to be a good guy. So you're going to be a good guy. It's just like, can't say no, especially if you don't have any track record behind you. You're the new guy, right? So like it would be like, if you're my boss at Kmart and you walk up to me and say, hey, Sinn, go clean up aisle 5. And I say, yeah, I don't think so. I'm going to just go outside and collect some carts. You're going to be like, well, I can hit the bricks, go work somewhere else. So, wrestling's the same way. Like you got to play ball, you do or you don't. You let the cards fall right or wrong where they fall. So I was taught by Ron Hutchinson to be a good soldier. So take whatever the promoter throws at you, good, bad, or indifferent, and do your best to make it work. So I did, and I tried. I wasn't anything work rate or anything like that. I think the name and the speaking Carney was irritating, but as far as like my work, I think all the producers always were happy with my matches. Passed all the airport tests. Like every time I go through the airport, somebody was, hey, can we take a photo? Hey, you're crazy looking. Hey, what are you? Some of them recognized me. Some of them just thought I was just neat looking to the point of wanting to bug a perfect stranger for a photo. So I think for me, I couldn't tell you exactly for sure, but I think it was sort of collateral damage is why I was cut short, for whatever that means, politics, budgeting, who knows, but it wasn't like I didn't do anything to warrant getting canned. It was just they were happy with me, and then I was in the phantom zone. No closure.
It seemed when you beat a guy like MVP in your debut that they definitely had plans for you, but I guess these things happen in
they did, but it got cut short, and the why is the elusive part. I don't know why. Mm-hmm. There was all sorts of big plans. There was all sorts of talk of starting out with something against Jeff Hardy and then going with Undertaker. And like, so there was like big stuff. And it wasn't for lack of work rate. Like I'll put my money where my mouth is work rate wise. Like I'm not a cocky guy, but I can call a spade and say like, I can work. I was brought up around guys that can work. I was taught by guys that can work. I'm an artsy fartsy guy. So I figured out the devil in the details portion of what we do quick enough. Other stuff, more looking at the business through rose-colored glasses is maybe something that took me longer to figure out. But as far as just being a good bump man for my baby face or being vicious or being unique or whatever, is like I can humbly go toe to toe with anybody on that account. And I was going to tell you guys. So again, I'm sorry. Today is the day of me kind of getting. Maybe I'm just too caffeinated, not caffeinated enough, and I keep on like losing my train of thought. I'm worried about. To be honest, I'm worried. I'm watching out the window, looking and seeing how windy it is, just to make sure my chickens and my goats are okay. I'm a big softie when it comes to the critters, but I had a freaking point. What that point was? That's gone. So
no worries. Did you have much interaction, hands-on wise, with Vince McMahon when you were there, or who was your main?
I had my initial meeting with Vince, and that's how we, he sort of, from that meeting, he came up with the Kazarni name and wanted me to speak Carney. But everything else was more or less me, and he was wanting me to be the babyface. But everything else was pretty much was me. It was like if I was a flashier bad guy, I really had like Rip Rogers, Michael Hayes, Cowboy Bob, Adrian Adonis. I had those guys on the brain. That's where my style was kind of in the vicinity of Chris Colt, maybe a little bit of Dr. Tom, but mostly your Bob Ordens and your Adonises and maybe Buddy Rose, and stuff like that. Michael Hayes, Rip Rogers. And then to all of a sudden be told to be babyface, that just was something I'm like, okay, well, I was going to squawk about it. I was just going to figure it out. Nowadays, weirdly, it's much creepier visually as I come to the ring with all that paint and all that crazy stuff or whatever. 9 out of 10 times I wrestle as a good guy. Nowadays I can do it in my sleep, but just that stage of the game, it was a new frontier for me. So I just took it as a challenge.
Mm-hmm. Well, unfortunately, having it cut short, nonetheless, a lot of people remember the character quite fondly.
I'm sorry, my brain, that brain fart just bubbled back around and came around. So I will say a good, bad, or indifferent about that Kazarni character. Some people hated it, some people liked it. I was torn about it, but for people to jump, oh, that guy sucks. Maybe I do suck. Maybe I love being here, and I love following my American dream, so to speak. So I'm a big advocate of free speech. So you can love me, you can hate me. That's perfectly fine. But I will say, good, bad, or indifferent, hated or liked or loved or anything in between. If I was there for that cup of coffee as Kazarni, that cup of coffee must have been memorable because people are still squawking about it, hating it or loving it, years and years and years later. So I will just leave, the positive people can walk away happily with that, and the negative people, they can chew on that. And there you go. But that was the brain fart, the lost and found brain fart that I was having a minute ago.
All good. We circled back.
Yes.
Steve Vendetta is asking, Nick, who do you think is a better cartoonist, yourself or Jerry Lawler?
That's a great question. I like his style better than mine, but I am more free flowing than him. As ironic as it is to say, I can work off the fly better than he can. If that makes sense, even because ironically in the ring, I mean, there's just about no better that can work off the fly the way Jerry Lawler can. I have all the respect in the world for Jerry. But when he's drawing, he is focused and watching exact things, whatever. I kind of draw out of my head. Like if I look at you, my Rain Man brain waves, I just sort of take a snapshot of you in my head, and I can pretty much draw you how you are, whether it's a cartoon of you or a caricature of you or realistically of you. I can just kind of do it. Where I think Jerry is drawing a lot more classically and beautifully. And again, I'm not healing on him. I think his art, I enjoy his art better than mine. I am just much more chaotic and sillier with my art. So I think it just allots for me to have more wiggle room, if that makes any sense.
For sure. Another fan is asking.
That's a cool question.
Absolutely. What is your favorite arena or place to wrestle in? And I know you've got quite a list there. So,
I would have had to say the Memphis Coliseum, because I wrestled there on the regular. And again, like the first question you asked me, what's some of the stuff I would have loved to watch as a kid? And Memphis was certainly a territory I would have loved. as a kid, and I love as a professional wrestler. I love as a fan. I love as a giant child. Just like the fisticuffs are no better than in Memphis. Like the knuckle sandwiches fly better in Memphis than they do anywhere else. Mm-hmm. Like you'd be hard pressed to find punches better than Lawler and Dutch Mantell and Tommy Rich and Austin Idol and all sorts of guys in that vicinity. And just walking down that aisle in the Memphis Coliseum, knowing that's the exact ring in the exact arena that the Rock and Rolls were in, that Andy Kaufman was in, that Andre the Giant, that Ric Flair, Jerry Lawler, all these guys were in. And now little me gets to play in that ring. Like, I'll take that. So I'll say my favorite arena. And I have fun wherever I go, don't get me wrong, but I think that's my favorite arena.
Here's a deep cut, and no doubt from a fellow Canadian. Wanted to know about your experience teaming with Vampiro in Puerto Rico, and whether you have any wild Puerto Rican fan stories that we hear about.
So met Vampiro at TNA. He helped me get to Puerto Rico, and we wrestled as a tag team for a short bit. Sort of like the creepy, the Los Muertes style of like baby faces. They're very kind of a superstitious culture. So you can either be the creepy bad guy or creepy good guy. They're going to like you. And so we were the good guys, and we wrestled these two. We did a program with these big, huge heels. And I guess in real life, one of them was a police officer and the other one was not. That's about as nice as I can put it for, I guess, the safety of my family. But they didn't care because the common ground was pro wrestling. And we're sitting in the locker room one night, and Vampiro says, "Hey, you want to see something crazy?" And of course I want to see something crazy. Sure. And he says something to these guys in Spanish, and this dude pulls out this giant hand cannon out of his bag. And he pops out some bullets and throws the bullets over to Vampiro. And I'm looking at him, and as a Canadian-born guy, I don't think I'd ever touched a bullet. I'm like, holy macaroni, these are huge, And I was just like asking him why, and his basic overall story was one of them was a cop and one of them wasn't. And so they have that just in case anything goes down or whatever. So that was pretty intense. That was pretty crazy. And that's definitely a wild territory. I enjoyed myself thoroughly in that territory. Wrestling Ray Gonzalez was probably my highlight of being in that territory. He just so damn smooth. Just the shape, he was sort of like one of those unsung baby faces that just maybe didn't get the acclaim that a Ricky Steamboat or a Rick Martel or a Ricky Morton, all the Rickies. He didn't have the clout of those guys, but he was a god in Puerto Rico, and man, he could go. He was so fun to wrestle. Wrestled him as a heel when I literally, I got canned at WWE, and literally by that weekend I was in Puerto Rico wrestling as a sort of a very evil, diabolical version of Kazarni. I looked exactly like Kazarni, but I was frothing green muck out of my mouth, and Puerto Rico is the fans are pretty gnarly there, like to the point where they don't have floor seating. Like the fans just throw crazy stuff. Where that's completely true. And so I thought, coming out there as a villain this time. So the Vampiro and I, we were loved as these sort of, gothic baby faces. But now I'm coming out as this circus psychopath. And so I thought, well, I guess the best way to keep safe from the crazy fans was just to scare the shit out of them, like kind of Brody Abdullah style. So, picture something between Brody and Joker. I went flying out through those curtains and I ran straight for the fans. And they had those big steel guardrails, kind of like almost, the big like railings in a stadium, This was at the big San Juan Stadium. And I went running just towards the audience. And it was a packed house. Like every seat in that stadium was full. And I went running at them, and I flew and I jumped up kind of like Green Goblin or Spider-Man or something. And I cocked my knees up in the air like a weird whatever, the vulture thing. My hands were all flying up, and I literally hooked my knees into the guardrail, and I at the audience, like I was going to jump on the audience, and the whole section of them tumbled backwards. And as they were all getting up, oh, puto madre, blah, blah, all this stuff, and I pulled out little water guns, and I squirted them, and then I'm frothing green stuff from my mouth, and I'm just giggling, but like scary giggling. And that right there, they were kind of like, all right, this fucking gringo is bonkers. We're just going to not fuck with this guy. And but they were super happy when Ray Gonzalez finally got the last laugh. So that was a really cool.
Wow.
But yeah, I always had fun. I had a lot of fun in Puerto Rico. You just open the floodgates, and I'm thinking like, Bushwhacker Luke's dog almost got me shot in Puerto Rico. Different thing. The first time when I was down there as a babyface, we were staying in a bunch of the wrestlers were staying at this. It was like whatever you want, just maybe a guest house, whatever you want to call it. And it was Bushwhacker Luke's place. Him and Dutch Mantel were like bookers. And so on an off day, I said to Luke, I said, Bushwhacker Luke, I want to go to the beach. And he goes, all right, well, Roy will take you. I said, okay, cool. Who's Roy? And he's like, my dog, mate. Because the dog knows how to get to the beach. I'm like, Bushwhacker Luke is telling me that his dog Roy is going to walk me to the beach on this foreign island that I've never been on before. Makes sense. Let's do it. Come on, Roy. And so sure enough, Roy takes me to the beach, and I'm sitting there sunbathing on the beautiful sands of beach in Puerto Rico. And these two cops roll up on me, these policia in their ATVs on the beach. And I'm thinking, oh, fuck, I'm going to get in trouble for having a dog on the beach is what I'm thinking. And as they get off, they're holding their guns as they're kind of side straddling off, like getting off off of a horse, but they're getting off of like these ATVs, these four-wheelers. And they say, Senor Sinn. They didn't say my real name. They said, Senor Sinn. And I'm like, fuck, this can't be good. And I said, see, senor. And they didn't give a shit about Roy. They didn't care about Roy at all. They liked that me and Vampiro were. I was by myself. They liked that me and Vampiro were the creepy baby faces, and they wanted a photo. Like, can we take a photo, por favor? And I'm like, yes. I totally poker faced that. Like I was like, nope. Like I thought I was about to get shot over Roy the dog, who would have probably shimmied all the way back to Luke's place, and he wouldn't have told Luke what happened. So we took photos, and I got him tickets for the show that night or whatever, and there you go.
Oh, that's tremendous. Speaking of a guy you mentioned earlier, D'Lo Brown, am I correct in my research that you and D'Lo started the Fantasy Slam camp concept?
D'Lo, so me and a former business partner, started it, and then I had D'Lo help me with it. Like I'd coach together, and we've coached plenty, like him and Jake the Snake. And then eventually we merged with the local school in Vegas here because they had the show. We weren't putting on shows, so we just thought it made sense to all sort of team up. So that school was FSW, Future Stars of Wrestling. So we just sort of all got in the bed together, basically, is what it was. So they are still the premier show in Vegas. I still teach there to this day. And but I mean, they had Disco Inferno and Kenny King teaching, and then now all of a sudden they've got Disco Kenny, Sinn, D'Lo, and Jake the Snake. So I mean, that's not too shabby any way you cut it. I mean, I want to say next to maybe the Performance Center, there's no other independent schools across the planet that has that many former TNA, WWE, All Japan, New Japan, AAA, guys all under one roof. So I thought that was a pretty cool deal. And we still have plenty of awesome guest trainers that come in on the regular. Like one of my students, Chris Bay, he often coaches there. He's so good. He's so damn good. TJP comes in sometimes. Kikutaro did come in quite a bit until he had some bullshit happen to him with his visa or whatever, which is I'm pissed off about to this day. But he's such a great dude too, Kikitaro. So if you're listening, my friend, I miss you, and I hope to see you soon. I think the TSA guy that gave him grief, I would like to super kick.
In terms of you, we had talked briefly before going on air about your action figure business, the custom figures. How did you get into that very unique endeavor?
Always been an artsy fartsy guy. I could draw or sculpt or paint, do tattoos, do all sorts of weird stuff. So when the pandemic hit and they locked us down like rats in cages, you know, I kind of took it up as a hobby just to keep myself moderately sane. And, you know, and then I would share what I made online, and people would sort of, hey, could I buy that? Hey, is that for sale? I said, sure, why not? And so that hobby turned into a little side hustle that kind of helped. It didn't alleviate, but it put a dent in the missed revenue of not being able to wrestle. And again, I'm a naturalized American citizen now. Like, I'm a dual citizen, Canadian and American and Canadian. But at that time, I still had my green card, and the way the whatever you call those payments, payoffs, whatever you call them, that they were trying to like give people like $1,500 to sign their life away, sit in their fucking homes like sheep. The way every year the legislation changes for green cards and for work visas, and marriage visas, and different things. And so the way it worked when that all hit was, if I took a dime of that stimulus money, that's what it was, stimulus money.
Yeah.
Then it would have negated my green card renewal. So, and I thought, you know, I moved here. I wasn't born here, so it wasn't my God-given rights. I felt like till I was naturalized, and I still sometimes feel like a guest at the table of this country, you know. And I think maybe just the polite Canadian me always will kind of feel like that. But I feel like I'm here to contribute. I'm not here to take. If I was born here, maybe I'd feel a little bit different about it. But I feel like it is my burden is not the right word. Privilege is maybe the correct word to be successful here and to, you know, bring in, you know, positive things to this country and stuff. Like, this country let me live the American dream. Why wouldn't I pay this country back in any way I could? So me and my ego just thought, I'm not taking a damn cent of that fucking stimulus money for a multitude of reasons. The green card renewal thing certainly being one of them, and just ego and not wanting to mooch off of something that wasn't my birthright. If it's your birthright, fine. But I just felt like it wasn't. So those toys inadvertently became a small subsidized form of income for me, since I wasn't jumping around in sparkly costumes, play fighting for a living. And I just, again, you're, you know, I can't imagine, you know, some 25-year-old guy or girl in some shoebox apartment in LA or wherever, you know, not being allowed to go outside. I can't imagine not going bonkers, because I had a big giant house, you know, got a wife and a kid and critters and lots of silly stuff to do. And I still went bonkers. I can't imagine some of these younger guys in these little apartments and studios and whatever. So did the action figures, and me and Dr. Tom and Al Snow and Gangrel and a few others, we got together, Cody Diener, we got together and we did the Snake Pit online, which was like we do Q&As, and we do match breakdowns and stuff like that. We would dial into to help sort of distract people with good intel, like give them good, useful information. But really more the priority was to distract them from being rats in fucking cages. And so those things, both the figures and the Snake Pit, both kind of in unison kept me sane, as much as hopefully helped keeping other people sane. And weirdly, as I travel and do shows now, I don't think there's been a single show since we were allowed to travel out of the pandemic that I haven't had some young wrestler come up to me that I've never met before and say, thank you, coach, for all that info, and you kept me sane during the pandemic. And that to me is my championship belt. That is like if I'm ever going to have any kind of legacy or something, I'll take that. You know, using your powers for good, I suppose, is something that'll help me sleep better at night. And making those toys is kind of for me to nostalgic out and just kind of zen out into being a little kid. I'm a giant child. I remember as a little kid watching my grandfather make like model airplanes in his little workshop. It was literally like watching paint dry. It was boring as shit. I didn't get it. I didn't understand it. I didn't give a shit about planes. I was more of an action figure guy. So I just did nothing for me. And it took years and years and years later, and many years since he's been on the planet, rest his soul. It took so long until the pandemic for me to realize what he was doing. He was zenning out to a better time where he was, he met my grandmother during World War II under the Nazi bombs dropping in London, England, where my grandma was British. She was a British officer in the British military, and my grandfather was an airplane mechanic, a fighter plane mechanic in World War II for Canada and for US. And so that's where he met my grandma. And so I guess making those airplanes was something that brought him back to his youth, even though that was such a crazy time in world history, let alone in his history. And so in the silly version, that's what, it just made me, when I'm painting or sculpting these little figures, it just made me think about, the 80s and when I was a little kid and thinking about, oh man, I can't believe that the Brutus Beefcake got his hair cut by Adrian Adonis, or I can't believe that Roddy Piper did this, or Hulk Hogan did that, or Jake the Snake DDT'd Ricky Steamboat on the concrete. Oh my God, my brain is blown. All that stuff. So it was just, it's basically a gateway to nostalgia and a zen point of contention for me. So that is what those figures are. And I think the next thing that is important to me is like knowing, I sell more of these things really to indie guys, like of themselves, the guys that just never got the opportunity to get to that level where some company would make an action figure of them. And a lot of those guys that they make, they're good. I'll watch a match or two of these guys if I don't already know them. Like if I'm meeting somebody for the first time that's sending me a message, I'll always go and check out one of their matches if they're a wrestler. And a lot of them are good. There's a lot of guys and girls that kind of slip through the cracks for whatever reason. And it's a shame because the pure wrestling fans that dial in to watch WWE or AEW or New Japan or TNA or whatever, they don't get to see a lot of these indie guys and girls. And just for whatever happenstance, maybe they got injured. Maybe they couldn't get time off of work. Maybe they knocked somebody up. Maybe they just pissed off somebody the wrong way. I said something stupid the wrong way. But there's a ton of woulda, shoulda, coulda guys that are out there that the wrestling universe from whatever company will never see. And that they're good and they deserve to be seen. There's some that are the shits for sure, but for the most part, there's some really great talented out there. And so for me to, turn somebody into a little kid like myself by making an action figure of them, I think it's a special, cool feeling for me. And I think it's because I know it's important to them. I know it makes them feel good. And that's why we wrestle in the first place. Like Triple H will say it. We thought it long before he ever sort of coined it, but we would always say smiles on faces. That's the deal, Mm-hmm. So when I see a guy kind of mark out like, oh my God, you made a little figure of me, that's amazing. Because I'll get a lot of like wives or boyfriends or girlfriends will ask me to make one of their boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever it is. It's a surprise for like birthday or Christmas or something. And so when they get it, they're like, holy shit, so that's a really, really cool feeling for me. It's not just serving them a Big Mac or selling them a t-shirt or whatever. I'm giving them something so personable. Like every single one of them, I can't remember what I ate for breakfast, but I remember every single one of those toys that I've made. Like there's always a neat, weird little backstory to it or some little tidbit of life that I thought was really neat about each and every one of them. So I'm like a collector of these souls as I make these toys, seeing like all these special, wonderful people kind of rub off on me when I get to I'm basically making voodoo dolls. I guess what I've really just realized right here on this podcast, I realized I'm making fucking voodoo dolls. That's what it is. I'm just using them for good and not for evil. So I make babyface voodoo dolls. That's what I should fucking call these things. Golly. So here we are. So
that's tremendous. Well, Sinn, I really appreciate you being so generous with your time. I know you've got the critters to attend to, but where can the fans find you on social media? And please let them know about any upcoming appearances or other promotional events that you have upcoming, including the action figures.
So People can reach me for making custom action figures. We call them LJNs because I don't make like the articulated action figure. I make like the solid, like a figurine kind of, like we call them LJNs just affectionately, from like those rubber wrestlers from the 80s. They're about 8 inches tall. So they're about like that. But whether you want me to make you an action figure of your favorite wrestler or of yourself or your better half or whatever, or you want to book me to wrestle, or you want to book me to do a wrestling seminar, or whatever the heck you want to book me to do. All my social media is the same. On Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, it's all Sinn Bohdi, SINNBODHI. Sinn with 2 N's, Bohdi like the tree. Please just send me a message. And I'm pretty darn good about getting back to people. I can miss the odd message. So if you haven't heard back from me in like a week or two, just please resend the message or something like that. Because sometimes I think like on Facebook, if you're not friends with somebody, those messages go into another weird little folder that I might miss. But I think Twitter, that doesn't seem to be the case. Instagram is also, I think it's got the weird little folder that you have to kind of click on it. But either way, if you send me a message on one or all of those things and I can find you wherever, that's great. And then we can walk through the paces of making those things. I try to make it as painless as possible, and I try to make it very, very cost effective, and just so everybody can have one if they want one. And there you go. Yeah, wrestling toys, wrestling matches, appearances, wrestling seminars. If you're feeling froggy, I'm your guy. I'm your carnival freak, no doubt.
Well, I want to thank you very much for this interview this evening. Extremely entertaining, and we'll stay in touch to keep on top of all your many activities. And once again, appreciate your time tonight on the Great North Wrestling Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. And all y'all here on planet Earth, be safe, be smart, be kind.
That's it, folks. See you next time.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please help me out and like this video, then click the subscribe and get notifications buttons so you don't miss any of my latest shoot interviews,